And it's actually a great note to end on as we enter or segue to the final question, which is about overall voter apathy. And I know we all have our own sort of intersections with that, either personally or within our own community. So the question is, from student ID restrictions, which we spoke about, to polling location closures, misinformation, to gerrymandering, there's a real segment of voters who just feel disillusioned by the entire voting process. So what would you all say individually and collectively to those voters who feel unheard, undervalued, and underrepresented?
Ooh, that's such a great question. I don't. I'll start by saying that for me personally, when somebody, tries to take away a right of mine, or somebody is trying to make sure that I'm a little less than I feel I should be, I tend to have double the reaction back. So I think that here the reaction, we've talked about a lot of weighty things today. We've talked, we've run the gamut from gerrymandering to rights restoration to student IDs. And then I would say that you have to get to that hopeful place of, okay, what am I going to do, build, create, whether it's getting 3 family members to participate, whether it's making sure I participate, whether it's making sure that I'm involved in a local organization or national organization, whatever it is, what am I going to do to bring about a more optimistic day? Because all that negativity is meant, and I think I said this earlier, to drown you, to make you feel exhausted, to make you want to watch some more Netflix and just not pay attention to what's happening in your community. And I think not showing up, all that does is allow somebody else to make the decisions for you about how you and your community are going to be able to live, work, exist. And so, I think I would say, never cede that ground, just keep going. And then if you need but the big thing is, I think the ability to keep going comes out of finding joy, like joy in community, joy in being together, joy in organizing your friends, joy in showing up. And I think you have to find something other than focusing on the on all of the arrows that are constantly coming at us, because this fight won't end this week or after this next election. It will continue. So how do you where do you find the inspiration to continuously show up and care about what's happening in the community? I think becomes really big, realizing there are a lot of people out there who just kind of want to take that joy from you. And once that's gone, it's really hard to stay motivated and to participate. So I think that is the thing. And the other thing is, for me, I wake up every day and think, getting to 80%, I think I kind of hinted at this earlier, voter turnout in this country is possible. There are countries that outside of the US that have very high participation rates. India has a high participation rate and has less people than us. You have Australia, which has compensatory voting. There are other systems where they're getting to really high turnout. We know how to get to high turnout in this country. Like I said before, we just need to have the will to do so and to pass the kinds of rules that we need and legislation that we need to get there. And the only way to get there is for all of us to continuously show up until we have people who we can really hold accountable for making sure our elections run in that way that really enfranchises everyone to have an equal say in our democracy. So focusing on how to build to that day is the thing that I would say keep you showing up and is kind of the antidote to apathy. And then for me personally, the other antidote to apathy is just knowing somebody else doesn't want to see that happen and doesn't want to see me and my friends, my community, my parents, my siblings participate in elections. So I'm not going to let that happen. And I hope that everybody out there finds ways to find joy and collective activism and making sure that keep access to the ballot box. I think the other thing actually is, this is not a fire drill. The threats to our democracy are very, very real, and people realizing exactly where we're at as you build towards a better day is really important. It's not a given that our family members and kids and things like that down the road are able to participate in free and fair elections. It's not something that will always just be sitting out there for us if we don't really move together collectively to protect access.
Love that. Jordan?
This comes back to the power of localism. I mean, no one is going to tell your story as good as you're going to tell your story, and no one's going to advocate for the issues important to you as well as you're going to advocate for those issues. So you can't afford not to be participating right now, whether it's, I dare I say, running as a candidate, whether it's showing up just to vote, whether it's getting involved with local causes and policy and things like that. There's always something for someone that's within your comfort level. And it's important that you don't remove yourself from the conversation because the conversation is going to keep happening whether you're there or not. So you might as well be there. But no, I've seen firsthand what happens in some of these communities if people aren't fully engaged. Small groups of individuals can sometimes completely take over the discourse and completely drive our institutions in directions where they typically wouldn't go because people have grown into such a sense of complacency and comfort with their day-to-day life that they don't really think to look beyond what just happens to land on their algorithm. But there's so much more happening in the world, and it's so important that we show up for it. Thinking back to my time with the school committee, I mean, we were effectively at the end of the day fighting over students, fighting over queer students, trans students, and whether or not they have access to materials, resources, whether or not they're going to be treated the same by their peers. And this was happening above their heads. And while it was happening, all I could keep thinking about is who's checking in on these kids right now? Like, we're going to war over effectively their right to a safe and accessible education. But where are they? It's so important that you show up because your voice can be a very influential factor. So please, please, please see what's happening in your backyard, see what resonates with you, and go because you're gonna really sway the conversation at times. So do it.
Yes.
Um, I mean, what I would say is I think there is this also overconsumption of just information and news that our brains are not wired to be able to process. So I think, oftentimes when I'm feeling overwhelmed, I realize, I ask myself, why do I feel overwhelmed and how did I get here? Oftentimes, it does come from like maybe I'm on social media too much. And, I think the social media inherently makes us kind of compare ourselves to other people without having the insight of really what's happening. And then I think through that, it can also often make us feel so alone. So, what I would say is, I think remind yourself that you are not alone. And, if you are feeling alone, if you're feeling lonely, then find a community out there who understands your struggle and, make it into something that is fun. Make it into something that you can really enjoy being in the present of, because life is not just about suffering. There is a lot of beauty and joy. But I think it's kind of like a balance between, or it also, I think just like knowing what everything that we need to do, in some way, it also gives us something to look forward to. And it also allows us to do something where we can find meaning and purpose within our lives. Because, of course, we're not anywhere close to where we need to be currently. But also, I think what I ask myself is like, well, like, how would my life be if there is nothing for me to kind of advocate about? There's nothing for me to really do because everything's already been done. And maybe that could be a little boring. So I think just kind of like, yeah, just finding ways to remind yourself, of course it's serious, but you don't have to take everything so seriously all the time. You can take a lighthearted approach in dealing with certain things. Like maybe it's like I don't know, making a film or going to a stand-up comedy show that talks about those issues in kind of like a different light, which still shows the seriousness of it, but just maybe from a different lens. And I think, yeah, I think just reminding yourself that you are not alone, I think is the most important thing, because I think we feel the most overwhelmed and we feel the most sad and helpless when we think that there's no one out there who understands us, who doesn't, we think that there's no one out there who's understanding what we're going through, which is so not true. And there's always someone out there. There's always probably a decent amount of people that you can really connect with and build that community with.
Yeah, the question about, democracy and like last thoughts is always hard for me because I mean, the reality is being a Black person who's descended from enslaved people, stolen Africans, United States, the reality is the United States has never been a democracy. Right. And so we have to deal with that. We think about restoring democracy or protecting democracy. Democracy for who? Right. And so I don't think until we confront that reality that I think 1619 Project deals with, Nicole Hannah-Jones, Imani Perry's book South to America deals with, In the Wake on Blackness and Being by Christina Sharp deals with, we really can't reach the folks most affected by this. And by that, I mean both Black people and non-Black people of color, Indigenous folks, but also low-income people across race, right? We've never had a space where everyone's voice was equal. We've never had a country where everyone's voice mattered. In fact, most people's voices could get them killed. So we have to really ground ourselves in that history so we don't have some Pollyannic views about what we can do if we just vote. Voting is not enough. Voting has never been enough, right? And so I'm guided by like a couple of quotes of folks that have passed away, but that guide me. Frederick Douglass says, "Power concedes nothing by choice or without a demand," right? Maya Angelou says, "Nothing will change unless you do," right? Asada Shakur says, "Never in the history of the world has a nation or a government taught its people how not to be oppressed by it," right? And so that all leads me to believe that this is not just a question of knowledge about the history of the country, but knowledge about the capacity of the country for harm and political and policy and physical violence. So now what, right? So I think that as important as it is to get to a point where we have full, not just 75, 80%, 100% participation, we have to think about what that participation might mean for the least among us. For trans people, that might mean even more violence. So how do we build a sustainable ecosystem where democracy is about humanity and not just about who's a citizen? And to do that, we have to be honest about where we've been and about the capacity for darkness that we all have. And so I think that means that each of us have to draw into our quiver of tools to move us not just forward, but forward in truth and forward in a type of politic of care, that everybody's life does not just matter, but it's more than mere matter. It's a type of atomic reality that is important for the constitution of the nation. And not just the legal constitution, but the constitution of like, how do we exist, right? So I think that means that somebody's a scholar. And if you're a scholar, that means you do the research and you explain what you found and what the implications are for today, tomorrow, and the children that come next. If you're a musician, that means you take that same knowledge, maybe from the scholar, maybe from your embodied knowledge, and you explain that again. And so does the poet. And so does the organizer. And so does the agitator that gets on everybody's damn nerves by shutting down the streets or turning off the internet, because they have to stop time in order for you to realize and recall what is happening to humanity in this moment by the state, and also what type of ideologies and politics and practices are we imbibing or ingesting from the state in our interpersonal relationships. Because it isn't just about what your senator does, what the president does. It's about how do you reenact these ideologies and politics with your intimate partner practices, with the way that you teach students, with the way that you deal with the customer service person that's getting on your damn nerves because you call for the 12th time today, right? So I think this is about us creating an ecosystem of care and being mindful and being humble enough to be not just uncomfortable, but to be annoyed as hell with the truth, and still take it in. So this is about community work, and a type of community work that is not about us being friends. It's about us being co-invested in our own humanity, and the reality that whatever happens to someone today, it could damn well happen to you in 15 minutes, 15 years, or 1500 years. And we have to take that seriously.
Awesome, guys. So I just want to thank everyone for what has been a truly transformative discussion today. I don't think I have personally heard or experienced a conversation on voting this robust from so many different lived experiences, and it has been an honor to host that discussion here on today, guys. So this is the first part of an 8-part series called Democracy Downloaded by My Bible and Vote.org. If you are watching this right now, we want to thank you for your attendance. We want to thank all of our amazing panelists. We want to thank all the people who are in the chat right now, chatting and sharing all of their great wisdom and all their inspiration to us as well. And we look forward to seeing you guys as we continue to just go traverse the American landscape with regard to American cultural topics, political and social topics. And we thank you for joining us on My Bible, which is the home for the next generation of change makers. And we'll see you soon.
Download My Bible now on Apple and Google Play stores to watch the full episode of Democracy Downloaded or to start your own roundtable. My Bible, the home for the next generation of change makers.